It's almost 2020, folks, and climate change is real. What's poor is that most everything one does as a human in society helps perpetuate climate change, if not directly, then indirectly through market economics. What if there was something different, a product that you could help build and participate in, a product that did the opposite with its money, instead of financing our destruction via oil, a product that protected us? Hey everyone, I'm New Noise. My game studio is called New Noiseworks, and the game is called The Promised Land. The Promised Land is a free-to-play pixel art farming MMO, where 60% of revenue for cosmetic assets will be sent directly to groups fighting climate change. Gaming can make billions, and instead of sending that money back to the banks, I say we fund our survival. Unrealistic? This is Gaming vs. Climate Change Episode 1, Making the Promised Land. Alright. Hey, you can call me New Noise. I'm a veteran web developer and fledgling game developer with about 13 years experience in the former and about 2 in the latter. Though the job market is insane for programming in general, most things don't seem to meet the urgency I feel is needed for climate change. So I'm wasting my savings and I suppose my job opportunities in an effort to make a free-to-play multiplayer game that funds climate-focused journalism as well as activism. It just seemed like a better idea than padding a 401k that was made to last after the planet's apparent lack of protection from a sun that will kill us all if we let it. This is a development log or devlog for my game, which is called The Promised Land, a farming MMO meant to actively fund groups fighting against climate denial. We're going to sell assets where 60% of revenue is sent directly to those groups. I'm going to break each episode into 2 parts. I want to talk about that business model and how it can cause real change in the fight against climate denial. The second part is going to be focused on the game's features and the progress we're making in development. And it's going to be pretty heavy on the first part for the first few episodes. Fair warning. Alright, so most everything that makes money in this world ends up indirectly, if not directly, investing in keeping our society dependent on oil and denying the nature of our changing climate. Most wealthy people or even hopeful retirees invest heavily in index funds, which are anywhere from 25 to 100% dependent on the steadily controlled profits of the oil industry. So our existing business structures all support big oil. This is a game that combats big oil. As long as you're supporting a public company or a company held by a public holding company or a startup with venture capital backing, that's pretty much all companies, there's a majority chance those profits will be reinvested into those index funds back into oil. I want to make something different, something where your passive as well as finance participation buys a product like you're used to, but you have the knowledge that the profits are going to build a better world, as opposed to everything else which currently guarantees its destruction. Alright, gaming makes money. Since dropping in 2017, Stardew Valley, a popular pixel art farming game, has made over an estimated $25 million. Multiplayer free-to-play games make a ton of money over time, giving a base game that players can play for free and support over time. Fortnite, Warframe, Path of Exiles are great examples of free-to-play games that successfully built a community, and a great game people love without being exploitative. And those games can make 9 figures annually with a product that grows with its revenue. Imagine a game that makes $100 million a year where $60 million is spent to work towards politically guaranteeing a better future. I know the forces we're up against have a lot more money in that, but they're also lying. And I'm willing to bet that the truth is much cheaper. The 60% bit is important too. Most times we're used to hearing portions of the proceeds go to without knowing what that portion is. Or we buy a t-shirt for $15 knowing only $3 can go to the charity due to the price of goods. Digital goods allow a chance to be more transparent and, at a point of scale, make a lot more money. To get to that scale though, I need y'all. Gamers are what makes games great. Fallout 76 is an objective mess and its only highlight was the community. I'm hoping to build a similar community, but with a better product and have a path of development that can make it feel like we're building something together. Alright, I'll go into detail about how the money parts will work in the next episode, but the gist of things is that we'll create a website to accept credit card payments using a third-party processor like PayPal, Stripe, or WePay to name a few, and we'll immediately split the transaction so 60% goes straight to the bank accounts of the groups in question, and 40% goes to my game studio to fund this game, and hopefully more. We'll keep a public ledger updated on at least a quarterly basis and do whatever we can to be transparent. But let's talk a bit about what types of groups we'd be looking to fund. Climate journalism is first. Now, journalism exposes the truth, yet today is vastly underfunded or funded by those with interest in capital gains via oil. Venture capital has taken over many existing journalism outfits and has proceeded to constrain its growth due to the fact that it doesn't profit nearly as much as tech, oil, or healthcare companies. Of the news networks that exist, advertising fuel its value and are dominated by financial and oil-based interests. This erodes the ability of news producers and editors to deliver trustworthy commentary on climate change. This is all ignoring the prevalence of a well-funded climate denial system on the far right of the spectrum. The recent elections in both the UK and the US have seen an abundance of yellow journalism made possible by the extreme wealth in our society. Most of the journalists and pundits you see on mainstream media are in fact people with millions of dollars in those index funds I was talking about. They don't want Medicare for all because it means less free money from healthcare profits for them. And they certainly don't want to get in the way of their free money from the oil, agricultural, mineral, and defense industries. We need to buy back the integrity that journalism has lost due to venture capitalism and wealthy gatekeepers, starting with climate-focused journalism. The next point of focus would be climate activism. Now, we need funds to protect and support all the general civic protests being led on the ground by climate protesters everywhere, but also corporate activism or lobbying has created laws to protect the oil industry. We need laws to protect society where lawmakers cannot reliably create laws when their only input is from lobbyists funded by the oil or finance industries. We can fund think tanks to work with lawyers to draft legislation that can then be passed by Congress people via lobbyists. I know that's not quite what Schoolhouse Rock taught us, but bills are now composed by the money the wealthy use to fund their think tanks. We're going to change that so grassroots funded think tanks write the laws Congress people sign to better support the 99%. In some cases, there are already organizations to support, but in some cases there aren't yet. But if there's one thing I know from a decade of working on websites funded by venture capital, you can get just about anything done with money, no matter how harebrained. So just stick with me here, folks. All right. Now, we need political activism more than ever. But more than ever, we all live busy lives that often earn us enough wealth to escape dangers of pretense. And if we don't earn enough for comfort, we probably can't afford to get arrested. Can you even leave work in your hometown for long enough to join a protest? Do you have the social skills and perseverance to organize one yourself? If you get arrested, do you have the resources to make bail and meet court dates? If you do, that's great. And if you don't, social skills and organizing are things anyone can learn, but statistically speaking, you might not have the time. And if you're out there on the front lines, you need financial support more than ever. I want to lower the stakes to activism so everyone can get involved in a way that directly helps financially. Retweets and shares make Mark Zuckerberg and Jack Dorsey money. Playing Fortnite for free makes Eric Sweeney all the richer. Playing this game will make you an activist on the ground floor, funding those that are willing to take greater risks on our behalf. In the vein of Mr. Rogers, who said to seek the helpers, you'd be helping the helpers. And maybe if you're already out there protesting, tweeting, organizing, well, do you want to play a game in your downtime? And for all those people you talk to that agree with you but can't quite join with you just yet, well, would playing a game be something they could do? And for all those non-believers, well, if they saw something where the money earned transparently funded those fighting for a safer planet, well, maybe they'd start asking why other things can't do the same. Everyone's at a different stage of the process, right? So, a lot of folks on the left side of the internet have been talking about the Marxist concept of praxis, which in short refers to the actual work of applying theories such that it causes change in the world, though it does presuppose the necessity of the masses learning all that theory. I find it funny that just when Marx is writing about praxis around 1850, Harriet Tubman freed herself, several other slaves, recruited for an insurrection with John Brown, and all with a hole in her skull. Look it up. Now, no one should have to be Harriet Tubman, and also no one should have to read all of Marx's writing. So as a middle ground, if I could achieve any sort of praxis, it would be creating a tool that made it easier to support progressive activism by recasting gaming as a form of mutual aid. But what does that mean? It would mean transparently creating a grassroots battery, or a capital fund more realistically, to consistently fund progressive climate politics such to ensure the human race's survivability on the planet. Yep, we're going to fund climate journalism so it's all they hear. Then we're going to fund climate activists and lobbyists all the way through their legal back doors until the only wind coming out of their throats are the words, "We're backing the Green New Deal." A bit aggressive, but this is exactly how corporations manufacture consent into policy. And it's a business plan we're going to use to steal our futures right back from them. Whether it's President Sanders, Warren, Biden, Trump, or that guy from Mad Max, I really don't care. All right, I'm talking about a game, right? Let's talk about the game. All right. The Promised Land is a 2D 16-bit style pixel art farming MMO. You'll be given your own plot of land to farm in a planned futuristic cyber utopia. That's right, utopia. Every other game is a dystopia, and chances are your life is increasingly becoming one, so why not make a game where the escape is to something a little more chill, right? I want to use this game also as a way to help expand our imaginations of what a better future could look like. Too often we think of urban and rural as separate, and I'd like to have a game that features environments that are a bit more mixed. Increasing opportunities for produce and food in general to be grown and distributed locally in suburban and urban areas will be increasingly necessary for a more green future, and the Promised Land's initial realm attempts to embody that. You start off on your own farm, but since it's an MMO, there's town areas and such to meet NPCs and other players. You're able to customize your avatar with skins as well as custom color palettes. And in the spirit of the game, one initial feature I'm working on now is community farming, or an area of town where whenever you enter, a smaller plot of land represents your area on the community farm, persistently loaded from a database, so you can show off your produce while connecting to other players, like a real community farm. The Promised Land features a cast of characters that can represent a diverse future where people are allowed to be treated as they wish. Meet Sakana. They'll sell you clothing and color palettes down the line and may or may not have superpowers. Violine runs a craft store. I have some thoughts separately on the idea of utopia in general that I'll go to later in this video log at some point. But the story of the Promised Land will be a utopia under threat from bad faith economic argumentation led by characters like Gil Bates, a legal charlatan who licensed other people's works for a living. Gil will be held back from wrecking society by characters like Baffin York, the Carter Police, who exist to make sure bad faith arguments are interrogated publicly before society can be torn asunder. And all that's in good fun, but that said, I'm planning on the missions being non-linear and mostly optional. If you want to just farm, fish, and live that utopian life, you do you. Alright, I've been working on this for almost a year now and have a base set of mostly back-end features, a multiplayer server, a deployment system, and more done. I'm focusing on content just now. I've burned through most of my savings in the course, and well, if you'd like to support me, I got a Patreon, I'll pitch at the end. I'm the sole programmer, but I'm working with the pixel artist named Maven, and all the art you see in the game is from them. In future logs, I'll steadily go into more detail on the game, as well as what we're working on up to the moment. You can download what we're working on right now at playthepromisedland.com if you have a Windows or Linux PC. Alright. If you look up advice on getting into game development, one of the first things you read is don't make an MMO, and it's good advice. It's lucky that before I got into game development, I spent over a decade as a web developer. I've got a pretty deep understanding of how things work on the internet, and I feel I've been able to apply it to set up what should be a scalable backend, which of course means I use the right tools. Nakama is the backend I'm using to power all the multiplayer services. It's made by a company named Heroic Labs and is open source. Godot is a very popular game engine that I'm using and is also open source. I've written layers of code to make sure that communication of ephemeral data like player movement as well as persistent data, such as the layout of your farm, are possible and scalable, but the heaviest of the lifting is done by Godot and Nakama. If that's too nerdy for you, good. I'm going to leave it right there. But if you want to hear more about the tech side of things, I encourage you to stop by my Twitch stream where I live code the game, and you can ask me any questions you have there. Alright. It's hard to make connections when you're just some weirdo on the internet with half a game built. I think you know where this part's going. That's right, you guessed it. I need your support. Hit those like buttons, share this on your social medias, maybe just tell your friends about it, I don't know. But of course, if you have some money to spare, please consider supporting my Patreon at patreon.com/newnoiseworks. That's patreon.com/newnoiseworks. Alright, I know times like this seem impossible with few people that have answers that go beyond voting, but I'm trying to build that answer. What we're up against is as big as humanity itself. It's society we're built upon, and to get it to change, we can't keep saying the same old things. How can you expect anyone to listen when you just use the same old noise? We need new noise. Alright, I'm New Noise. My game studio is New Noiseworks, and the game is called The Promised Land. I'll be talking more about it on the next episode of Gaming vs. Climate Change. Alright.